This is the new 2026 Lucid Gravity, and it's an electric luxury performance SUV, or so they say. To me, it looks like a minivan with similar styling and dimensions, but whatever you call it, it's pretty cool with impressive performance, a great interior, and lots of interesting quirks and features. Today, I'm going to review the Lucid Gravity, and I'll show you everything. I've been using DeleteMe for years now, and let me tell you, I'm still just as grateful for it today as I was the day I signed up. The first time I saw my personal info all over the internet, it was honestly kind of alarming. My full name, old phone number, old addresses, even info about my family, it was just sitting there publicly accessible. And it wasn't on just one site, it was on dozens. I had no idea that kind of data was floating around, let alone how easy it was for anyone to get their hands on it. And listen, as someone who's pretty visible online, I've had to deal with some pretty weird stuff. Random emails, weird messages, people digging a little too deep. That's why privacy is something I take seriously. DeleteMe became a core part of how I protect myself and my family, and that's why I always recommend DeleteMe. It's been one of the best decisions I've made when it comes to online safety and peace of mind. DeleteMe is a subscription service that removes your personal information from hundreds of data broker sites. And here's what I love. You don't have to do anything complicated. You give them your info once, what you want removed, and they go to work. Every few months, they send me a personalized report showing exactly what they found and what they've removed. I've gotten emails like, we found your name, phone number, and address on 38 sites, and we removed it. It's honestly kind of incredible. And they don't stop. This is an ongoing thing. DeleteMe keeps monitoring and removing your info so it doesn't just come right back. Over the years, I've watched the amount of my data online shrink more and more. It's like a digital spring cleaning, but someone else is doing all the work. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe, now with a special discount for our viewers. Today, get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/demuro and use code DEMURO at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/demuro and enter code DEMURO at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/demuro, code DEMURO. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Lucid Gravity, and I begin this video sitting in the seat that's mounted in the front trunk. Yes, that's right, there is a seat in the front trunk. You open up the front trunk and then you sort of unfurl the seat, and there's this component that kind of comes down over the front bumper so that the bumper doesn't get your legs dirty and so that you don't scratch the paint, and then you can sit here in the front trunk. When the car is parked, you're at a sporting event or just hanging out at a scenic area, you can sit and hang out in your front trunk seat. One of the many quirks of this vehicle, more coming in a minute, but first, let's go over the basics. The Gravity. This is Lucid's brand new second vehicle, following up on the Lucid Air luxury sedan that came out a few years ago. Right now, the Gravity is offered in two available versions. There is the Grand Touring model, that's this, starting price around $97,000 with 830 horsepower, or you can step up to the Dream Edition version with a starting price of over $140,000 and closing in on 1,100 horsepower. Both absolutely astonishing figures, obviously. Now, it's worth pointing out that more versions will come. There will be more entry-level versions and possibly even a higher-level version with a higher price and more power, but for now, that's where the Gravity begins. And the available range is amazing, up to 450 miles between charges, maybe a little bit more. Not quite as amazing as the 500-mile range of the Lucid Air sedan, but getting pretty close. And with this and the Air, Lucid makes some of the longest range electric vehicles on the market. Now, the Gravity is offered with 2- or 3-row seating, and Lucid says it is a luxury SUV intended to rival other electric luxury SUVs like the Rivian R1S, the Volvo EX90, the Cadillac Escalade IQ, and other big 3-row non-electric luxury SUVs like the BMW X7 and the Mercedes-Benz GLS. It is a luxury SUV. That's what Rivian says. But me personally, I kind of think it's a minivan. First off, just take a look at it. The overall profile, the shape of this vehicle is very minivan minivan. The sort of teardrop look, especially as it comes down in the back, that's got a very minivan-esque feel. Plus the long front windshield reminds us of minivans of yore, the Toyota Previa and old school models like that, but even modern minivans like the Chrysler Pacifica. And then there's the dimensions. The Lucid Gravity, at 65 inches high in its normal height, is actually shorter in height than a Honda Odyssey, about 4 inches shorter overall, and about 9 inches shorter than a Rivian R1S. The R1S is a lot bigger, but even the Odyssey is taller than this. So you have the long, swept teardrop shape, the long front windshield, the low height. This kind of screams minivan to me. Now, I asked the Lucid people about this, and I figured they would tell me to get lost and it's an SUV, but what they actually said was, if people want to view it as a minivan, they kind of can. The whole point of this vehicle is to be sort of a segment buster with a fantastically cavernous interior like a minivan, but also excellent capabilities like an SUV. And so if people want to buy it instead of a van or an SUV, it doesn't really matter to Lucid. They were trying to maximize everything with this vehicle. That's what they said. But regardless of what you want to call it, let's talk through the Gravity's quirks and features. Starting on the outside, where you have pop-out door handles. You walk up to the car, it recognizes that you have the key in your pocket, the door handles pop out to welcome you, and then you pull on them to open. They're electronic, and you open the door from there. Lighting in this vehicle is rather interesting. Up front, you have a front running light that goes the entire width of the vehicle, and also Lucid is lit up in the front. The Lucid script spelled out and each letter individually lit up to make sure that people know exactly what is coming. In the back, you also have a thin light bar that goes across the entire vehicle, along with very thin horizontal turn signals that blink on top of that light bar, although in back you do not have Lucid lit up separately like you do up front. However, you do have one very unusual item in back. When you open up the tailgate, all of the rear lighting opens up with it, and that means Lucid had to come up with a solution to still have rear lights visible with the tailgate open, and you can see it here. There are actual auxiliary brake lights and turn signals mounted inside the cargo area so that the car still has a lighting element visible with the tailgate up, which was required for compliance with federal regulations. Very interesting to see the kind of two sets of rear brake lights, turn signals, etc., because the lights go up with the tailgate. Now, you'll also notice mounted on the tailgate in back, you have a Gravity badge, so people know what this is. And it also says Gravity on the side here at the D pillar in sort of this spot next to this aluminum trim. It looks pretty cool. It helps identify the car. Other than that stuff, the exterior design of the Gravity is not particularly fussy or crazy or even really quirky. Once you settle the minivan SUV debate, there's not that much to discuss. It is a clean, simple overall look, and you can clearly see where styling cues from the Lucid Air are brought into the larger Gravity with sort of the overall sort of clean, flowing design language. It's a pretty simple, attractive, kind of minivan-y look. And indeed, when it comes to the Lucid Gravity, most of the interesting quirks and features are on the inside. We begin with the key, which you can see sort of looks like a normal key with just some buttons on one side, lock, unlock, and both front and rear trunks. On the other side, you will notice a bear. Lucid doesn't really have a logo. The bear is borrowed from California's state flag. Of course, Lucid headquartered here in California. They're proud of that, and so the bear has kind of become Lucid's unofficial logo. And you see another bear when you open the door. On the door sill, the bear is over on one side, and on the other side it says Tahoe, California, and then it gives some coordinates. These coordinates match up with the location of Lake Tahoe, and the reason it says that on the door sill is because this Gravity has the Lake Tahoe or Tahoe interior theme. All of the interiors in the Gravity, they're not colored, instead they are themed, and the themes all match some part of California. So this is Tahoe. There's also a Yosemite theme and a Mojave theme, which I guess is like desert looking, and that's how they do their interior colors. And then the color, the theme that you choose, is matched up to what you see on the door sill. But you climb inside and you instantly notice some rather quirky stuff right off the bat, starting with the general placement of the screens and the steering wheel. You can see the steering wheel is mounted below a rather large upper screen that sits on the dashboard, and the steering wheel itself is sort of this odd kind of pushed down, strangely shaped thing, and a sort of weird overall design and look in order to be able to give you visibility over the steering wheel and onto that big screen sitting on the dashboard. Definitely an odd and unusual steering wheel instrument cluster situation, and there's a lot more. Starting with the windshield. You look out on the windshield, again, you can see this kind of long, low, sloping windshield, but it doesn't just stop. Instead, above you, it continues on, and the windshield also becomes the sunroof over the front seats in the Gravity. So it's just one giant piece of glass, as you can see, windshield to sunroof. In fact, there's no stopping it at all, and so the sun visors are mounted directly on the glass in sort of a place where they felt was right, rather than at the top of the windshield frame like in more traditional vehicles. You also have mounted here a center area that includes some lighting and your rear view mirror, along with a thin LED light strip that goes sort of in the middle, bisecting the upper part of the windshield, the front sunroof, and it kind of goes back further into the car, much like what you have actually in the Bugatti Chiron. But we move on from those very obvious quirks and we discuss the other thing you instantly notice when you climb inside. It's nice in here. The interior is very high quality. You can see the seats have this very nice perforated leather. They look really good, everything nice there, and the rest of the materials are also nice. The dashboard has soft touch, nice materials, aluminum, metal, nice stitching, leather, no cheap plastic in here. This is an expensive vehicle, over $100,000 for this Grand Touring model, and it shows with a very high quality interior that is fitting the vehicle at this price point. It's very nice. Now, as for these screens that do a lot of the functions in this vehicle, you can see obviously two of them, the main dashboard screen and then the central lower screen. And interestingly, in the center, the lower and upper screens are both touchscreens, both accessible to driver and passenger sitting in the front. And Lucid told me that is entirely intentional. In fact, these screens are intended to operate completely independently, so that if the driver, for instance, has a navigation destination directions going on the upper screen, the passenger can still access the lower screen in order to change the radio or the climate control or whatever. And so you can have basically two of those things functioning at once, which is a pretty neat idea. But let's talk through the screen quirks, starting on the lower screen. This is sort of the home screen menu on this lower screen, and it has your basic vehicle controls. At the top, you have your drive modes, smooth, swift, and sprint. You also have controls here for the steering wheel and the power mirrors. You can tap on either one and then adjust the steering wheel, the mirror positioning using this kind of touchpad on the steering wheel, depending on which one you've pulled up, and it will adjust the wheel or the mirrors. Pretty simple. On this screen, you can also adjust your ride height. Now, it's important to mention the Gravity has air suspension. So I covered the overall height and how kind of low it is compared to SUVs, but you can raise it. The Gravity can be raised from 5.3 inches of ground clearance, which is similar to a lot of sedans, up to 9.3 inches of ground clearance, which is pretty similar to like real off-roaders like the Mercedes G-Wagon. And that kind of gives the Gravity a little bit more SUV credibility and less minivan-ness, since minivans don't usually have raising ground clearance or more than 9 inches of it. Now, for basic controls on the center screen, you slide down from the top. You can see this little horizontal line. You slide that down, and that gives you access to all of your sort of simple, more frequently used controls. Like if you want to fold in the mirrors, turn on the child lock, the window lock, open the glove box, it's all in here. And you can do other stuff here too. Lucid Vibes, that thing you see in the center, basically allows you to configure the interior ambient lighting color. Of course, there's a dog mode like in other electric cars. All that stuff is accessed with a simple swipe down, regardless of which screen you're on. The lower part of this center screen has your more specific controls, like your climate controls, your navigation, your music, your phone, pretty much like what you'd find in other vehicles. However, there is a section of this screen that you will not find in other vehicles, and that's this little kind of like diamond that looks sort of like an S. You tap on that, and it pulls up the Lucid Sanctuary mode. And Sanctuary mode allows you to turn on various complete themes that sort of overtake the vehicle. When you're parked, you can select one of these themes, and then you go into sort of a meditative, kind of mindfulness-based, like, retreat in the vehicle. Take a look at what happens. Now, as you are doing this, it doesn't just take over the speakers and the infotainment screens as you saw, but it also will adjust the lighting in the cabin for the right mood and turn on the heat or the climate control, the air conditioning, start the seat massage in this vehicle all at once to sort of fit your sanctuary experience, enhance your well-being, which you can do while you're restfully parked somewhere. Not a bad idea, actually, and kind of interesting. One other cool feature in the Gravity is the range display. If you go onto the lightning bolt, the charging icon, it can pull up various charging settings, but it can also show you your available range, and it can do that on a map showing exactly how far you can drive depending on current road and traffic conditions. So you can see parts of the map kind of jut out further. I guess that would be freeways where you can go a little bit further at higher speeds, and parts are a little bit closer in. It is a pretty cool idea, a way to visualize your exact range, exactly how far you can go on your current state of charge. I've never seen it at that level of detail before compared to other EVs. Now, below the center screen, you will notice there is a row of physical switches here along with a dial. Lucid told me they are very cognizant of sort of the recent backlash against too many things being incorporated into the screens, so they wanted to include some physical controls for more frequently used items, and that means adjusting the climate control temperature and the fan speed can be done with these physical switches, and you also have a dial here for stereo volume in the center, which is cool. And at the edges, you have these little buttons that have circles on them. It doesn't seem obvious what they do, and that's because they are customizable buttons. You can customize them to do different functions. Specifically, right now, the options are you can have them control heated and cooled seats, or you can have them open up the glove box. And those seem to be your only options. I wish you could do more with these buttons, but regardless, it is a pretty neat idea to have customizable extra buttons here for vehicle functions on this sort of lower button area in the infotainment screen. Next, we move on to the upper infotainment screen, and the central part of the upper infotainment screen, or at least the right part in the center of the car, this is again intended to be kind of a mirror of what's below so that you can have two independent things happening at once without getting in the way of the other screen. I also like the fact that the home screen here is basically a bunch of widgets that are fully configurable, so you can decide exactly what you want displayed on this upper screen in various different sections so you can see a lot of stuff at once, and again, keep that separate from having something completely different going on in the lower screen. To me, this seems like a lot better of an idea than a lot of the passenger side dashboard screens that some cars have that don't really seem all that useful. This is a pretty cool function. Now, moving on from the central part of this screen, you go into the middle of the gauge cluster part, and that's pretty standard, your usual gauge cluster stuff. It's fairly calm. It shows you like the speed you're traveling, how much range you have left, all the things you'd expect to see in a gauge cluster screen. But possibly the most interesting part of this whole dashboard screen is over on the left side, where you have a few unusual items. The far left, you have some controls, and over here you can turn on your lights, your headlights here, your fog lights. You also have windshield wiper controls here, your lock controls, and dedicated buttons for your windshield and window defoggers, so that if you get in the car and that's going on, you don't have to go into a climate menu. You just tap right there. Those buttons are always present, which is a cool idea. The more interesting thing here, though, is just to the right of all of these controls, there is a separate screen that gives you more vehicle information. Specifically, you have a trip odometer here, or you can scroll to the next and get the tire pressure, or you can scroll to the next and get your current efficiency and driving range metrics, and they call this dynamic efficiency because it is dynamic. If you blast the climate control, it will provide you with a tip over here, an efficient driving driving tip, hey, turn down the climate control to increase your range. Or if you're flooring it, a tip will come up and say, hey, don't do that. There will be actual tips that are tailored to your current situation that let you know how to maximize your range if you are on this screen. Or you get rid of all these screens entirely. Slide over one more and you go to the Zen screen, which turns it off and kind of enlarges your gauge cluster and makes it a little bit more calm in the overall screen situation. Also worth pointing out, you can adjust exactly which screen you're looking at over here using the thumb pad on the left side of the steering wheel. You can swipe left or right and kind of choose each different screen, or if a warning comes up there, like your trunk is open or whatever, you can swipe it away also using this steering wheel pad, which is kind of neat. And next up, other interesting quirks up front beyond what you have in all of the screens. For one, this central panel here that says gravity. It looks very nice when it's in place, but you can open it up. And when you do open it up, it reveals what you'd expect: cup holders, wireless charger, etc. Now, behind that, the central armrest also opens up and of course reveals a storage area, pretty common. The unusual thing here is that the storage area actually continues underneath the cup holder area that I just showed you. And so there's a chance that some of the stuff you're storing in this center console will get stuck under, kind of out of reach or out of visibility under the cup holders, which I have a suspicion people are going to complain about pretty soon, but that is the current situation with the car. Also interesting here is the turn signal and gear shift stalks, which are coming off the steering column. To the right, you have the gear shift, and it's actually pretty simple operation. Down is drive, up is reverse, and park is a button at the end. Nothing too unusual there. On the left, you have your turn signal operation. Obviously up, down for turn signals. You can also use it to flash your high beams, but the interesting part is if you press the end of the stalk, it turns on your wipers and actually pulls up the very same wiper controls you have over on the left part of your gauge cluster screen. So two ways to access that. You can press the end of your stalk or just go directly to that screen, but either way, you're controlling your wipers. And finally, last interesting quirk is getting out of the Lucid Gravity. You do not have a traditional door handle. Instead, you have a door trigger. You kind of like pull it with your finger and then it pops open. A pretty cool and actually nice feeling way to get out of the Gravity. And next we move on to the back seat, the second row in the Gravity, which I have to say is exceptionally roomy. There is a lot of space back here. I have the front seat position where I would sit as a taller person, and even then my knees don't get close to touching the front. I have headroom, I got hip room. It is a nice place to be back here, and not just because it's roomy, also because the materials are nice. Again, you have the same high quality perforated leather and back just like you did up front. Everything back here looks nice and there's a lot of space, and you have this cool screen to adjust your climate controls. You can change everything back here, not just the temperature like some cars. You can actually adjust the fan speed, the position of the air, everything, including you have heated rear seats, which is pretty nice. And with all of those climate control adjustments, the air has several vents. You can see two right here in the center and then two more over on the side. There's a lot of climate control thought for the rear passengers, which is pretty nice to see. Now, beyond that, not too many exciting things going on in back, but you have everything you'd expect and a little more. Specifically, you got your charge ports, USB-C, mounted on the backs of both front seats, which is nice. You have cup holders integrated into the door panels in this little storage pocket, but if you're looking for more cup holders, you can also fold down this armrest and you got extras, which is also nice. The little extra treat they give you back here is tray tables. You can see they unfold from the backs of the front seats, and then you have trays. And I gotta say, I actually really like this. You see it in some really high-end vehicles, rarely in cars like this. Instead, back here, you typically have a little cargo storage compartment on the backs of the front seats, but I have a suspicion that in a family vehicle, the tray tables probably get more use, and it's cool to see them back here. You also have little tiny graphics of bears on the backs of the front seats, another example of Lucid's unofficial logo coming into the car, although sadly, you do not have those bear graphics on the rear headrest. You do have them on the front headrests, but they didn't carry them over into the back. Instead, you just have these little small bear touches. Now, as for the third row, like I mentioned, the Gravity is offered with 2-row seating or 3-row. This one has the third row, and getting back there is really easy. You just push this button and the seat automatically folds up and then pushes forward to allow for really easy access to that third row. And when you're in the third row, you will notice it is again exceptionally roomy. Not huge, not for tall adults for long trips, but surprisingly large back there. there. Really good use of space in this vehicle for passenger volume, sort of like a minivan. It really is an impressive overall packaging for seating, including the third row. Now, the third row also has a few other nice touches, specifically a couple of climate vents for the third row, which you don't always see. You also have cup holders in the third row for rear passengers' drinks, and you have little USB-C ports for third row passengers to charge their devices, which is also always nice to see. A little bit of love given to the usually forgotten third row. And finally, we move on to the cargo area, which is definitely interesting and clever. Starting with positioned as it is, there's not that much space behind the third row seats. There's decent space, but it's not huge back here for a larger three-row vehicle. However, you can increase the space by lifting up the floor of the cargo area. There's a large, surprisingly big, tub where you can dump stuff back here, and it really significantly enhances and increases the cargo space with the third row seats in place. Pretty impressive to see that. And also impressive to see the seat foldies situation. If you want to fold down the third row, very easy with this strap. You just push it and the seat goes down. Pretty simple. But you can also fold it down for a completely flat load floor. And to do that, you remove the cover over the cargo floor area, and then you use this kind of handle to pull the seat into the cargo floor, and you have a completely flat cargo area with the third row seats completely stowed. Lucid proudly bragged to me that no other SUV offers this feature. I think that's true. However, it is pretty common in modern minivans, and they've included it here to give you maximum cargo space with the seats completely folded, which is pretty cool. Now, the other interesting thing is that if you want to fold down the second row seats, they also fold flat, but they do it with the push of buttons. You can see these switches over on the side of the cargo area. You press them, and the seats will automatically fold down flat. So you have power folding second row seats, but manual folding third row seats, which honestly, I actually prefer, because power folding third rows, usually you press a button and you wait and wait and wait, whereas here, you just pull the strap, the seat's down, it's really easy, and I think this maximizes your cargo storage seat folding in a way that few other SUVs really do. It's all a pretty practical situation back here. Now, one other item worth noting in the cargo area, you do have a power outlet back here, but it's a 12-volt cigarette lighter style power outlet and not household. In fact, there is no household power outlet in the entire Lucid Gravity, which is a bit of a letdown, especially for an American company building a car in America. They know the power ports we're using, and it would be nice to include that. A lot of other SUVs and minivans include household ports in the car. But since we're talking storage, we should also discuss the front storage compartment, the front trunk. You open it up and you can see it is really big. Now, this particular front trunk is not as big because of that front trunk seat that I showed you before. But that is an optional accessory. You do not have to get it. And even if you have it, you can remove it. But even with it in place, you have a surprisingly large front cargo storage area, much bigger than what you get in other vehicles, and again, contributing to the overall great use of space for passengers and cargo in the Lucid Gravity. And if you want to close the front trunk, pretty simple. There's a small kind of unlabeled rectangular button over here. You push it and the front trunk closes up automatically, swallowing whatever gear you want to put inside. So there is your tour of the quirks and features of the Gravity, but I'm very curious to see how it drives. Love the Lucid Air. Very interested to see what this is like on the road. Let's go find out. All right. Driving the Lucid Gravity. Let's floor it. This is such an impressive car in terms of acceleration. Couple of things I want to discuss with this. I've been driving this around now for a little while. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. I've obviously made a lot in this review about how this is kind of more minivan than SUV. There is a big benefit to that. In addition to some drawbacks and some benefits in terms of cargo space and passenger space, there is one big benefit, and that is driving capabilities, because SUVs by nature are higher, they're taller, and the result of that is that dynamically they are never as good. They just simply are not as fun to drive or fun to use as cars. Minivans are cars. Ultimately, their floors are lower, that lowers the center of gravity, and in this particular case, there are two other other factors that lower center of gravity. Number one is the battery pack's all down low, which is heavy, and so that lowers the center of mass, the weight of the vehicle. And this is even shorter in height than a lot of minivans. The cool thing about the air suspension is you can lift it up to get that SUV ground clearance, but if you don't want to, you can actually keep it even lower. And so the driving experience, specifically the handling experience, is pretty impressive compared to other SUVs. Steering is good. They've intentionally, what's clear to me, they've intentionally tightened the steering to make the steering feel kind of sporty, which it does. But it's not just that. You can tell the body roll is minimal, like compared to SUVs and minivans. The body roll is minimal. It's pretty athletic around corners, despite a pretty significant size overall. It actually is kind of a darty little dynamic, fun, engaging vehicle, and that is a benefit of its minivanness. It's more kind of car-like proportions, ground clearance, overall size, definitely makes it a little bit more engaging and more exciting because they're able to kind of keep it lower and give it a sportier feel. And you can unquestionably tell that that is the case when you're driving this around. It is just more engaging on corners. It is less body roll. It makes you want to go into corners harder. It allows you to go into corners faster. You feel like you're more stable. You feel like you're not kind of as ponderous as basically any SUV. So that's kind of a nice thing. Now, with that said, I have to say, sitting here and driving the vehicle, just, not going hard into corners or flooring it, it really feels like a minivan. Bringing the A-pillars forward allows them to have a very aerodynamic shape, which is nice. And it really helps them improve range, I presume. However, the drawback is that's what vans are, this like long front windshield kind of coming down over the hood. And then they actually add to the minivan feel with this steering wheel and the instrument panel above the steering wheel. If you've ever driven like a bus or a commercial vehicle, the steering wheel is usually low and you're kind of looking out high. That's what this feels like. It almost feels like you're driving a bus. In a little bit of a way, it kind of spoils the amazing handling of this car. You're going around corners well, but you're doing it with this sort of low steering wheel that kind of feels bus or van-like, and it kind of removes some of the enjoyable sort of engagingness of the experience because you're not sitting there like a sports car. You're kind of like above it, sort of over it, which isn't ideal. Now, one thing I will say, and you got to give big credit to Lucid, the luxury experience of this vehicle, van, minivan, SUV, sporty, whatever, the luxury experience of this vehicle, whatever you want to call it, is excellent. The ride quality is surprisingly good, and I say surprising because it is pretty agile in corners, and usually when you get that sporty suspension, you're sacrificing ride quality. Here, I mean, ride isn't incredibly smooth like an ultra luxury car, but you're also really cornering quite well. Like, it's an amazing balance. One of the better balances I've found, actually, in terms of smooth, supple ride quality and also like a good, fun driving experience. This is a very, very quiet interior. True of a lot of electric cars since you don't have the powertrain, but sometimes that means you can hear other stuff more that you're not used to hearing in a gas car. Not the case here. You really don't hear the tires excessively. It's quite a well-designed luxury vehicle. This is a very, very nice car. It really is an excellent driving situation. It's an excellent luxury SUV. I think they've done a very impressive job really making this a very refined, very competent product, regardless of how you classify it. And so that's the Lucid Gravity. Call it a minivan or an SUV. Whatever it is, it's pretty impressive. It drives great, it has big power, the tech is excellent, the interior is nice, and there's a lot of interior space, kind of like in a minivan. Anyway, the Gravity, there's a lot to like, and now it's time to give it a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 71 out of 100, which puts the Lucid Gravity here among some similar cars, just behind the segment leaders, but still up near the top. The Gravity excels in its driving experience and its overall luxury, but I do think buyers will be put off by the high price tag and the minivanish styling, especially compared to rugged rivals like the Rivian R1S and the electric G-Wagon. Still, the Gravity is an excellent vehicle with a spacious and really nice interior, and it does a lot of things very well.